One of our viewers asked a question about different dimensions and how our lives interact with them. So we're going to touch base on that tonight. And I think specifically, Nathan, they were asking about Earth or humanity as a whole moving from one dimension to another one. So we're just going to give you some insight about some of the things we know about dimensions and fun stuff like that.
Yeah, and so it was interesting because I think that humans in general tend to overcomplicate things. And I think that there's a shift in consciousness happening right now. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we need to worry about splitting it into levels and saying, oh, this here we exist in this dimension and now we're moving into this other one. I think it's more of just a constant shift, a constant growth. And I think that it's, in a lot of ways, personally, I think it's a waste of people's time to really worry about all this outside stuff when your real focus is about creating your reality personally.
Here, in this dimension.
Yeah, where you're existing right now, because all of source energy is focused right here and right now, because it's creating this for us to experience.
But I can also understand that people who are awakening, like consciousness is new for them, they need like words or an understanding. I think the beautiful part of the dimensions, because there's so many articles on fourth dimension, fifth dimension, seventh dimension, all these dimensions, and yes, I can see where people can get caught in that.
But do you think that it's a little bit like Santa Claus, where people need to feel good, so they need to feel like, hey, humanity's getting better, we're moving, we're reaching this goal. It's not like we're just getting better. It's like we're getting up to the next level.
I think it's more. I think
in
it's
a sense,
more.
ego.
I think the beautiful part is they're recognizing something is happening, that they're in tune enough and self-aware to know that there's something shifting and something happening. But of course, the ego wants to identify it with something and wants to label it as something.
And file it.
But I think the beautiful part of that piece is that people are recognizing that something's happening. A lot of people who wouldn't have recognized it before.
Something's always been happening.
Yes, I was going to say, I think we are already in the fourth, fifth, seventh dimension.
But they haven't figured that out yet. They're now just awakening to it. You know, it's like traffic happening. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, where's all this coming from? And I think that's where that comes from. But you're right. And I was saying earlier how I think it's also too, like consciousness, it's like volumes of a book. You know what I mean? Like we have experiences and everybody's in a different place. Yeah. Like we have people who have like a lot of knowledge and wisdom about things and people who are just learning and they're making mistakes and that's the way they're learning. And I feel like it's
fair,
just a different...
I haven't invested a lot of time personally into this, so mine's just based on my perspective. So if that's your belief, that's cool. I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
But for me, it kind of feels like people need to feel like we're achieving a goal to justify the shift that's happening.
I think you're right. And I think they pigeonholed it into something that they can maybe understand or, like you say, put it in a file.
Give it a word.
Give it a word, exactly. Because we are multi-dimensional beings.
Absolutely.
And we have experiences on multiple dimensions at the same time. So a part of us in the fourth dimension right now having experiences, yeah. Is it affecting us here? It could be crossover. I mean, that could be a show in itself. But to all of a sudden say all humanity is moving from one dimension at the same time to the next, it's kind of like saying, you know, what I'm saying is we're already there. And I think you said it perfectly. I think more people are waking up to the fact that there are possibilities of other dimensions.
Yeah. Or vibrations or consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, on a physical, quantum level or something like that, they think that there are 9 to 11 dimensions. String theory talks about vibrational, they're like strings of vibration, and that there are multi-universes and things like that.
All these theories out there.
Right.
And I think you get caught up too, because now people are talking about dimensions, but dimension they're using in a different term.
Yeah.
Right. It's
three-dimensional
here. And it's a way to feel safe, right? Yeah. It's a way to feel safe of like all this stuff is going on in the world. And I think of it as like volumes of a book, like Conversations with God or A Course in Miracles. It's like there's sections, right? Or volumes. If you were to start on the third volume, you're going to be lost. So I think that like the dimension idea, the concept is like, okay, we're opening up the book and we're seeing something. Even though we may be on other books And we're like, wait a minute, that's been going on. But they're like, but wait a minute, this is what I see. And that's where, I work with a lot of mainstream, but then also too with advancement too. So, and I think that's that part of, it's all words. It's all words.
And I think a lot of it, maybe that word dimension is part of what throws me off, because
Right.
I think
It's misused.
I don't think that that's necessarily the right term, and I think that, again, yes, humanity's consciousness is shifting and expanding, because it always is. Everything is always more expansive than it was before. Everything's always better in this moment than it was the moment before, because Source has expanded into new ways. I use that definition that God is self-actualizing limitless potential, and we're the self-actualizing part. So all the limitless possibilities exist within Source, and we're the ones that are focusing upon them, and that focus creates the density that pulls it into this dimension.
Yeah.
So we're the actualizing part of it. But I don't know that, I just don't want people to get over complicated with it, because it's such a simple process to grow and expand.
And that's why I think it's such a great question, because you can get so many articles on it. Like, you can get lost in it. Like, you can get lost in
I think people
the
get
maze.
overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
And I think it really, if people over dive into it, or I think it can
They
really
get stuck in it.
You get stuck in it, and they get confused with it. And like Nathan said, really keep it simple. I mean, I don't think the whole human spiritual group is moving all together, because we're all made up at different levels. We're all on different vibrational things. So for all of us to move at one time, it's kind of like trying to herd cats. You know what I mean? It's just going to be like really hard. So I think...
But you have to admit, like, we go through phases. Like, I feel like we are going through another phase of people, like you had mentioned a while ago, people are going back to the essence of their truth.
Yeah.
What's their truth?
Yeah.
What's my truth isn't necessarily what you're going to consider right or wrong.
Yeah.
And so that could be part of dimension, is like, okay, now people are getting to the heart of their truth, and now that's opening up. So that's why I say dimension is a word, but there's so much more layers that can come from it. And
I think people are using dimension as a physical location.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or a physical vibration.
Vibrational plane
right,
of existence.
Exactly. It's over here, and we're here, and we're jumping to here.
And
I
that's
feel,
ego.
and I feel like it's a thing where they're saying, we're moving to a better place. Like, where we are isn't as good as the fourth and fifth dimension.
Yeah. Right.
And to me, it's like, well, as soon as you start judging where you are now, then you're not
defeat
really,
the purpose.
you're never really going to get to that better place, because you're keeping yourself trapped.
I still think part
Like-
of us is already in that dimension, and maybe we're looking back saying, look at those people back there. They think that they're, taking a cab here, and we're already here.
If we're source energy, then we have to be there,
Right.
because it doesn't exist without us being there.
Right, and
So-
that's when we have a tendency to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
But some people like to package it up.
yeah.
Put
And
a
it's
nice
kind of
name on
like
it.
peeking your nose, like, what are they doing over there? And look what I've done, and look at them over there. And that's, I think, where the ego, to
Yes.
clarify more, is that's where the ego comes in. Like, I'm in this better space, or I'm over here. But then
I'm in the sixth.
when you have that thinking,
Nathan thinks he's in the seventh.
when you have that thinking, guess what? You're already back, right?
And so that's why I say, look, if it works for you, that's awesome. But for someone who's coming to us with this question, because
Yeah.
it's obviously confusing her.
Be careful with how you go there with it.
Yeah. So like, if it works for you, if it excites you, if you're thrilled by this discussion and you want to dive into it, by all means, because it's a different words are going to get people to different places, and what resonates for you might not resonate for me.
Yeah.
But for the viewer that specifically comes to us because she's confused by it, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Take what's good and what resonates in your heart, and throw the rest out.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to take in something, an idea and a concept. And I have to say, for this viewer who came up with the question, I say it's a beautiful thing that she questioned it.
Yeah.
Question it. Question everything.
Even what we're
Consider
saying.
the
That's a
source.
good point.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
that's
good
why I
point.
say, like, you're getting these concepts and these ideas, and you're baffled by it and confused by it. And I have to say, kudos to her for having enough oomph, gusto, fire to say, hey, I want their opinion on that. Or, you know what, I want to know what they think about that. And then she'll take in all that information and compare it to what she knows. And I always say, take in what resonates and dump the rest. And I think that's the beautiful part of it, is being able to be comfortable enough, to feel empowered enough to ask a question, because this is what you're going through. And I'd say it's a beautiful thing, because it means that she's asking questions,
I think
that
she already
she's
knows
curious.
She already knows
And I
the
think
answer.
that is the beautiful thing,
And remember, it's all conceptual, and anytime you have a concept about anything, it's an abstraction of the truth.
Yeah.
So, when people are trying to describe these experiences that exist outside what they can feel, what they're experiencing in the moment, it's always going to be an abstraction of the truth. And so there are some people that maybe are having experiences that they can't explain, so they use words like dimension, and they feel like humanity's moving to this place with them, so that's how they're describing it.
Right.
My concept of dimensions, it just doesn't work for me in that way, so I don't go that way.
Yeah.
It's like and I hate to use this, and I don't hate it, but the analogy again, but it's trying to describe the shape of water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the only way you can do it is if you start putting parameters on it, and that's what they're doing.
Well, the
in this thing.
ocean has different dimensions, let's say.
Yeah.
So there's the shallow shore part, and then the further you go, it gets deeper and deeper, and then there are parts where there is no bottom.
Yeah.
So in a
but
way,
at some point you have to make a decision. The shallow water ends here, or the shallow water ends here.
Exactly.
And
So
it's
you're
everybody's
still making the
perception.
separation.
So
It's not a truth.
right.
Because it's always moving.
And so my perception of shallow water is going to be different from Joe's because I'm a lot smaller than he is.
Yeah.
So when you go into that space, that's
and it's going to
the
be
thing
different
aware.
for both. Neither one of us are going to be right, even on our own, because every 12 hours it's changing.
Yeah, right. Tide's moving in and out. And
Right. And I think that's what's happening with the vibration and interdimensional contact. So I think that I think it's a way to package up an idea
Yeah.
or a concept.
And I think it's a great question because it's not something we all completely agree on.
Yeah.
Like I can get that point. I get the point. I totally see it. And I can see your point.
Yeah.
And I can see your point. And I think that's the cool part. So thank you for that question. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
the stuff that we want. We want the challenging stuff. We want the things that...
And I would love for someone who teaches this stuff to send us information and questions, because I would love to come back to it with someone else's
Different
perspective that
perspective.
goes into it and say, all right, let's look at it again.
and tear it apart.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but if you have that, if that's the perspective you come from and you want to
Yep.
share it with us, and
We are open.
yeah, I'm always open to learning and growing. Just personally, whenever I've looked into it, it didn't resonate with me. It felt like
Yeah.
overcomplication, and it felt like marketing. I'm just be honest, true to what my experience was.
I think it was just another way of packaging up, opening up to spirit, or opening up to your natural spiritual being.
I have to say, I've never really thought about it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, when I do my channeling and I work with people's loved ones and I work with archangel energy and other energies, for me, it feels like there's different vibrations. So I could call them different dimensions, but
could.
it's a feeling that's different.
Yeah.
And I don't think about it being separate anymore, though. I just think about, okay, this is the feeling into this, and this is the
But that-
feeling into
that
this.
would
and
almost
it just is.
You're accessing all of them.
And it
That would
just
almost be
is.
like calling sound a different dimension than light, because it's a different vibration of energy.
That's true.
But it's all
the
this
same.
energy.
Exactly.
You're right.
That's why I don't
That's a good
think
example.
more into it. For me, it's the way it feels.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this vibration feels this, so I know it's not this. I know it's this.
You're using it as an identifier.
Yes.
More. Yeah.
To be able to create words, to be able to communicate with somebody who really doesn't have any insight on this, which is why they're coming to see me, right?
And again,
Well, that's what we do as mediums. Is we
And this is we're in between. We're
Right.
the bridge, right?
We're using our natural instincts to be able to differentiate between different dimensions or different vibrations, whichever way you want to use. And I think that all of us have that to a certain extent because that's where we came from. But we just fine tune it a little bit more so that we can pick up those dimensions. So
And I feel like for me, it's like I got to go up, like an airplane. Like I got to go up and then I come down. I think this is why people who start doing this work, they get tired because it's like, when you travel and you're going up to high altitudes.
But you know why you feel like you're going up? Because most of the time during our everyday lives, we're not working from that connected place. But you don't have to go up because who you are
Just is.
as a connected being is already there.
And that's
you
why I
don't even
don't.
have to go up. You can go sideways.
Well, that's what it is, exactly.
And that's why I
training
never
everyone to
feel that
train you.
anymore. It just, for me, it just is.
Yeah.
But to be able to train somebody, to be able to help them.
You're trying to use language to describe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You
Yep.
can't, if you brought all the different dimensions or different entities or whatever in on one row, if you're training someone, they're going to get it confused. But if you say, oh, one's over here, you might feel one up here and one over there.
And this is what this means, and this is what
And
this
then
means.
they can start to feel the different energies
Yes.
and they can
Or I
get
don't
it.
necessarily use that anymore. Like I just know, but in
Right.
the beginning, I used it as like
Yeah.
this is like my tool and
Well,
my
it's a train-
navigator.
yeah.
Roadmap.
Yes.
Yeah.
So dimensions could be that like
roadmap
a
for people.
tool, like a basis, like a volume 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then as you get to the all the volumes, you're like, you forget because you've been using it for so long that it's like, wait a minute, and it's like breaking it back down again. So it's so funny when I do like energy work and training. It's funny, I don't realize like how like instinctual it is for me now. So when I say like an affirmation or something and somebody wants to write it, to slow down and say it, it's like, wait a minute, let me go back. And so that's what happens is like you are like expanded in this sense. So to come back, it's like we like wait a minute, let's go back. But it just becomes just part of what you are. It just becomes part of who you are, where you're going, that just energy of all that is.
That's why I loved when I started doing this, my guide said, look, mediumship isn't about connecting to some soul outside of you. It's about expanding yourself into that energy that where they exist. So you're expanding yourself into the part of you that is them.
Oh, absolutely.
You're meeting them.
Yeah. Yep. And
but it's because in that moment, they're a part of you because you're expanding into that space where they exist.
And that's why I love the work that I do. I think it's so sacred for people to be able to come in such a vulnerable space and really wholeheartedly trust that they're coming and opening the space, because you both need permission to come in this space. And I think that's the beauty of the work, is like when people leave, it was like, gosh, I got a glimpse into, that experience of their loved one. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I knew that person. Or
I know, isn't
man,
that
that was so beautiful, and how powerful that this husband got his wife here and had these incredible messages that really healed her heart so she can continue to live her best quality of life, and I just think that that's the beauty part of, again, these vibrations and these energies.
Or
like
tapping
it's
into them. We can, because we get the residue of it. And it's like we get part of that love. It's going through us as we're transferring it, but some of it sticks with us, and it's like, I like this. This person is really a hot ticket, and I can feel the love they have for their spouse or whatever, and it's like, but it's going through us and we're picking it up.
Yep.
And I think too, like, we don't realize that like even the people that are around us are in different spaces. Like some people, and again, that goes back to like the idea of dimensions. Like we could be side by side with somebody on the highway who has a corporate job, and then somebody who is just creating, not just creating, I shouldn't say that, cancel that in that way, who is a creator in their life. And they have their own essence and their own energy, two different vibrations, but they're existing together, right? They're in this space, and neither of them knows like what the other one's doing. And I think that goes back to your point of saying, just do you. Go back to what you're doing and not necessarily think about or worry about like where everybody's going consciously or what's happening, because what happens if it does shift, there's this fear of like, oh, wait a minute, it's shifting back. And do you know what I mean? And that just creates more of stunted growth, and I think it goes back to your point of like, bring it back to the self.
I like the expression, keep it simple, stupid. And
Silly.
I like the stupid part though, because when I'm reading something that becomes so complicated that I start feeling stupid, then it resonates with me saying, hey, keep it simple, stupid. Like not that I'm stupid, but saying like, you're feeling stupid because you're overcomplicating things. Right. So when I feel that and I feel like I'm not getting it, it's like, you got to keep it simple.
I say that when sometimes people talk to me and they're saying all these big words and all these spiritual concepts, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, I feel stupid, right? And I'm like, I know I'm not stupid, but yeah, that's right. It's like I'm overcomplicating it. Like I'm overthinking it and being in that space.
I think a lot of them do that, and some of them do it on purpose.
They lose me.
They overcomplicate things. I don't know. Some do it for ego, to show like, oh, I know more about it, so I'm going to use these $20 words. But what they're really doing is they're not. If you cannot communicate,
it really does kind of separate.
If you can't communicate that information to other people, then you're doing a disservice.
Absorb it.
Right. Well, I always say when I write my books, I said, listen, the information that comes through, I want to be able to keep it to the point where people can understand it, because if they don't finish the book, they're not going to get the knowledge. So let's keep it, easy flowing so that people can understand it. And I do have them dumb it down, but you have to a certain extent, it's tough with quantum physics and stuff like that, but you do the best you can, because at some point, if a reader wants to know more about it, they can go to different sources, And
it's funny because I may not be able to sit down and read a book on quantum physics, but I live it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just living it. Like, somebody would say, like, oh, you're already doing this and this part, or you're in this space. And that's what, like, I say, like, I can't sit down and read a book like that. It loses me, I lose focus. But in turn, I may live like that. I may already be applying these concepts. I might be already in the flow in so many different aspects that I think like some people are
everyone
just
is.
in the space and some people can read about the space.
Well, and you can get very, very technical about it, or like I explain it to people, like, oh, what's quantum or quantum state or something. I'm like, quantum is just the really, really small stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you want like Newton's physics, that's like the moon and the sun. That's the big stuff. But when you get into a microscope and you look down at atoms, that's quantum. And when you start looking down at the little tiny stuff, crazy stuff happens. Yeah. And that's the difference. That's quantum. Yeah. You know?
And that all perpetuates bigger energy.
Yes.
And moves action, drives energy for us to move.
And that's why they're always looking for a unified theory of relativity, which you can take the big stuff and the little stuff, because what happens is they react differently. And when we start getting down to little stuff, we start to see a lot of things we talk about, intuition, how observing an object can change the object. So how
space can separate things, but they can still react at the same time.
That's right. That's a duality.
Yep.
So, and things aren't actually materialized or created until your thought is there. So that's big stuff that we talk about, but you can't really talk about that stuff.
And that comes down to the idea I said before about, as you focus upon something, you bring it into this density. So something is just as a wavelength until you focus upon it into a particle.
That's quantum theory, or quantum mechanics. Now, people, if they're really fascinated, they can go and look at it and read it and stuff. And other people are like, all right, I just need a little bit of knowledge. And that's the little bit. That's
all right.
Yeah, but like we just said, now quantum stuff is just that little stuff and how it interacts. And once you get down to atoms and electrons and all the little stuff, they react differently, and they do react by thoughts and all sorts of stuff.
And consciousness appears to have an effect on it.
So that's what I mean. Like,
as opposed to like the moon or that house.
You guys know the nitty gritty of it. I just apply it. Like, it just is for me.
We all do.
So I don't know that there are actual words and science to it. I just live it.
My understanding is very basic. It's just
well, what they're proving is the stuff that we've talked about and that we do, even mediumship and stuff like that, they're learning to prove that in a scientific way.
Oh, they're fighting the hell to try not to prove it, but
well, some are not trying to.
But I mean, what they're finding is they're not finding the answers to disprove that. You know what I mean? So
well, and I think this goes back to the point of dimensions. Like, there's a part where you can poke your nose in it and you can look at it in detail, and then there are other parts that you can just live it and just live and just have the experience. And I think that's where you're coming from. Like, you're like, just live it. And then there are other parts who are like, wait a minute, no, I want to read about it and I want to see how it breaks down and I want to know the mechanics, and that's that.
Right.
No is right or wrong.
You
It
don't
just
have to know
is.
how your car works to drive it.
Exactly.
I don't.
And some people might. They want to get down
Drives
and
my
say,
boyfriend nuts that I don't know, but.
well,
Hey!
no, right. So you just get in, it takes me from point A to B.
And he knows all the intricacies, right? And I think that's the beautiful part is that, hey, like, you want to know that stuff, and that's great. I don't need to. I just get in it and go. And law of attraction will say, it will just go. So that's that space where
I like the point,
it is no right
but
or
I
wrong.
like taking the two ends and putting it together because I
Yeah.
can see it from the
mechanics of it.
The mechanics of it, and then also how we use
Apply
it,
it.
just on an everyday without wondering how it happens.
Yeah.
But I like learning the mechanics
That's
of
the
it,
simple part.
of seeing how they can actually prove how it happens. So actually,
Fascinating.
When
So,
you look,
yeah.
it is fascinating because people say they call it woo woo, but when you look at quantum physics, it's not woo woo at all.
But that may be how people feel about dimensions. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I know this is vibration. I want to get into it as space. But again, it's all words, right? And that's the thing. Some people want to get into the mechanics of it. Some people want to know it. And some other people like me, I'm just like, great. I'm grateful. It is. Let's move on from it, or let's move forward.
I like to use it as when you get into an argument with someone or you try to explain something to them, that it's not all woo woo.
Yeah. Yeah, that there's an actual science to it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
And I think with the, again, with the dimension part, I just think that, language, the more language you apply to something, the further you get from the truth. With anything, even the stuff we sit here and talk about this stuff, for a living. That's what we're doing. But, the more words you apply to it, because every word's an abstraction of the truth, the further you get away from it.
Well, I think the problem is that people use words, they overgeneralize with one particular word.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, dimension, and there's they'll use 50 different definitions for it. So it's like, all right, which dimension thing are you talking about?
What do I believe, or what do I? And you're like, wait a minute, just come back here.
Even
just come back here.
Even like people that use higher vibration and lower vibration, they that's been interpreted as positive and negative. It's
Right.
like, no, it's not that.
It's all the same.
Right.
Not positive and negative, but people interpret that way. It's like you get lost in these
Well,
words.
we use
For me,
it.
it's like
We
a
use it.
navigation.
We all use
it's a
it.
navigation, just like spirit and like angelic or higher power or that wisdom. There's a difference, but it's not better or worse. For me, it's just like, okay, that's how I navigate and know the difference to be able to communicate the best possible way.
Yeah.
It cuts off all the middle stuff so that I could not waste time and just get to the point. And like, okay, this is where I have to focus my energy. And I think that's the important part, is for people to understand that. And it's the ego that's want us to separate and say, okay, but this is this, and this is better, and this is worse. Just like with energy therapies. So many people say, well, I do this, and this is better than this, and I do this, and this. And I'm like, no, it's all the same.
It's a different
just
vibration.
an extension of,
Right.
like, you've learned something, and okay, now something grows bigger within you, and now you move to the next space. And that's just part of expansion and growth as a human being.
And understand there's equal parts of God in the highest vibration and the lowest vibration.
And I
love that.
And I don't even know, like you say, the high vibration or low vibration. I mean, I think it's just a scale so that people can communicate on how.
Yeah, it's
The feeling
it's
is
basically
different.
like, ignorant, no knowledge, like a baby has an accumulated knowledge, that's low. And then high vibration, let's say it's,
genius.
a genius or something that's, whatever. Yeah. And I think that's how they kind of want to correlate
And
it
that
to
comes
people.
with time. That comes with growth.
That comes with the concept that people had of God in heaven being up there. So higher, looking up higher,
I
and
see.
lower,
Right.
hell was below the earth.
Yeah.
That's an
Or-
old concept that's just been pulled forward.
Here's a question. Maybe it is higher vibration and lower vibration. If we look on a quantum level, maybe the finer the vibration is has something to do with our spiritual souls and
Like the density.
the density, and the lower of it is perhaps a part of us that has not developed to that higher level.
And I think it's all perspective too, because I was recently around somebody who was seeing somebody else as miserable. And I was seeing that person as miserable. So their perception was, this energy is a lower vibration. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a minute, it's the same vibration. But they don't see that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we come up with this idea of higher or lower. So for me, it was almost like, I don't care what it is. I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want to be part of it. And that's that part of, like, for me, it wasn't a higher or lower. It was just like, I don't want to be in it.
I think it's just language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just again, it's the perceptions we place upon. I think, what you said, higher or lower, faster, slower, that could all be accurate. But I think what happens is, because people have looked at heaven as up and hell as down, higher people automatically associate with good, lower with bad.
Higher
Yeah.
education,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, so
And
it's
like
a
you said,
scale.
everybody's degree of what's good and bad is completely different based on their experience.
Yeah.
Some things that some people will accept is something that somebody else absolutely wouldn't accept.
Yep.
So what is heaven or hell? Because everybody's vibration of it is different, or everybody's
It's a
experience
scale.
of it
It's a
is
scale so
different.
people can discuss it.
Yeah.
You have to have some perimeters
Yeah.
so you can discuss it, you know?
Yeah, and it comes back to the idea of concepts. Everybody's concept of it is different. So when you're saying higher vibration, you're saying it, and I'm saying it.
We all mean a
our
different thing.
interpretation's all different.
Yeah.
So we think we're having the same conversation, but we're really not anyway.
Well, I think that, they try to use it at a certain norm that people can all be on the same page at the same time. But then they'll throw in the fourth dimension, going to the fifth dimension, and it's like throwing a monkey wrench in there, and it gets people all
Wait a
confused.
minute, what?
And then we have viewers say, "What do you think about dimensions?"
Yeah.
Our next show,
Yeah.
people will be talking about, "What do you think about the vibrations and the higher and the lower?"
And like I said, I think it's a great question. I think it really was something that appealed to the point of this show, of what we wanted to do. We want to take things like that and expand in different ways.
Definitely.
So I can't thank you enough for offering us that question so that we can dive deeper and sort it out and really kind of hone in our our space with it.
Yeah, try to make it a little bit easier
This
for you
is
to
why
try
we
to
say
understand.
always consider the source. Take in what resonates and dump the rest.
Exactly. Hi everybody, if you like what you watched, please subscribe on YouTube and like us on Facebook. And check out our website at alwaysconsiderthesource.com.
Hey, if you want us to come out to your location and do a live setup, we'd love to do that. Continue to send in your questions, and we look forward to interacting with you.
And remember, always consider the source.